All right, check. How's everybody doing? Hey, who wants to go to space? All right, I'm not surprised. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here. My name is Andrei Mitran from Northrop Grumman. And it's very fitting that I'm following the wonderful presentation before, where you got to see some of the great work that NASA, ESA, other nation states are doing in science, in pushing the edge of understanding and our human exploration of the solar system and beyond. And I'm here to discuss a different topic, but sort of a related topic, which is, okay, we're learning, wonderful, so what? What do we go beyond that, right? How can humanity participate in this experience beyond knowledge? Can we benefit from space? Space is so vast, with untold reaches. Much like on Earth, can we benefit from the science and then operationalize it? And normally, for benefit of humanity, we do that in a market, right? So before I go into my presentation, I should say, what is commercialization? What is a market? So a market, many definitions, but one is the easy, free, reliable, repeatable exchange of goods and services from supply and demand, right? So that's very important. I'm going to make a parallel between what we do in space and, let's say, aeronautics. So like myself, many of you have probably traveled here from afar using some type of an airline. Hopefully it was comfortable. Hopefully it was reliable. Hopefully it's repeatable. I like to get back home, right? So that's an incredible achievement. So an aircraft is a very sophisticated element. And if you put yourself in 1914, the only people that could fly an aircraft are very rich, or some type of science, or some type of military, right? And in the next few decades, the market and commercialization has enabled many of humanity to participate in aircraft, and not just in one market like human transportation, but even a letter. When you in 1914, sending a letter in an aircraft would be a crazy idea. So expensive, ineffective. Now, you probably don't know, but you don't even blink, right? That's how it's being transported, especially across the world. So, okay, now we're in space. Can that happen also? Where can we push the concept of commercialization to take advantage of all the good benefits that science has done? And this is actually not Northrop Grumman vision or some of our aerospace partners. It is a NASA vision. So it is a nation-state vision based on the predicate that their mission is science. And they've done a wonderful job together with our allies, with European Space Agency, Canadian Space Agency, all of humanity, right? We've all learned a lot and operated in LEO now for decades. And we're going and looking beyond the solar system, like you've seen in the prior brief. And now we're looking at LEO, and NASA says perhaps there's enough activity there where we can operate a market. Now, you may say, well, we already are. And we are in terms of satellite communication, positioning, all sorts of elements that are non-manned. But if you can bring manned platforms for commercialization, then a lot more can happen in space manufacturing, tourism, etc. So with that in mind, NASA is sponsoring in several stages the commercialization of LEO, so they can focus together with our partners into the exploration of the solar system and leave the markets to grow this LEO economy, and then hopefully move beyond that into the moon, Mars, the asteroid belt, etc., and keep benefiting from this wonderful opportunity in space. So with that in mind, of course, Northrop Grumman, my name is Andrei Mitran, we are supporting that. We've been supporting this voyage with NASA. We have the privilege of right now being one of two providers on the commercial cargo services, which is going to the International Space Station regularly. What you see here is the Cygnus spacecraft, so it's the Northrop Grumman cargo that usually about every 6 months we're performing supplying runs to the ISS. Our partners at SpaceX are doing that as well, and Sierra Nevada will probably be doing that as well soon. So you see an entry of suppliers in the market, and there is demand from NASA, there's demand from other nation states, and I'll talk some more later about the demand we get from the commercial market, actually. So this is a service When you see a Cygnus or a Dragon spaceship approaching the ISS, you think about that as more like an airliner where the company owns the product and we're delivering services and goods and other elements to the ISS. Subsequently, because we own the product or the spacecraft, we can actually go and do other science. We can support other entities. And that's probably one of the advantages of commercialization, that flexibility that the market gives us to support other elements. But how do we start on this voyage, and what is this Cygnus? So first of all, Cygnus, a little bit of just light technology here. Cygnus is a heritage-based spacecraft. On the right side, you can see the service module, and that's Northrop Grumman and our predecessors at Orbital Space Corporation. It's essentially a couple of satellite systems like the GeoStar and LeoStar combined to provide this element. So that's the service model that gets you to and from the ISS. And on the left side, you can see the pressurized system, and that's with our partners at Thales Alenia. And that's been going on now for a number. I believe our first mission was in September 2013. We are approaching our 18th mission here in October. So very, very exciting. It gives us a lot of repetition, a lot of knowledge on how to do this service more and more effectively. And it creates for us that concept of economies of scale when the cost can go down, we can add more customers and support essentially pressurized systems and unpressurized systems going to the ISS and in LEO in general. In terms of our missions, again, primarily our main customer being NASA, we're delivering cargo. And believe it or not, there's good business in trash removal. So on Earth, trash removal is good business, so is in space. So there's a lot of trash, a lot of residue that needs to be expelled from the ISS. There's a couple of ways you can do that. One of them is fill up the Cygnus with trash, and then it re-enters in the atmosphere somewhere in the South Pacific, and problem solved. And there's also an airlock that NASA can use for repeated action as well. So multiple options there. But besides that, the science and secondary missions are interesting because now we can go to a commercial partner or another civil customer, and we can say, okay, what else? If I have extra space, what can I do? Can I put a payload internal to the station? Can I put something on the outside? There's certain elements there where we can put external payloads. That can be delivered to the ISS, or it can be something that after we deliver the cargo to the ISS, we pull away from the ISS and we stay on orbit for a number of months and perform experiments as our customers need. And then re-enter, and in this case, the aircraft is destroyed, and there's some options for return with the Dragon. In this has been one of the most interesting elements for us. How do you combine civil and commercial partners into a profitable endeavor? And we're doing it repeatedly. We get to learn, so there's value in repetition. This is, for us, very exciting, and we're also very excited for our partners at SpaceX and Boeing that now are doing essentially the same thing with commercial crew. So good news there. Again, this is a complementarity, and we're looking forward to their success because, as I'm going to talk in a couple of slides, we're counting on them for some services. Again, I've mentioned before the Cygnus free-flying science and research. This is something that even beyond the ISS, think about it. This is a pressurized system that we can take up there and keep it on orbit for a number of months or years, and we can do science. For example, recently we've done a fire experiment when we light something up, something you don't want to do in the ISS, but we can keep perhaps a slight manufacturing process going. We can do all sorts of tests, and eventually gives us that chance for scalability. The other thing that I'm going to point to you is, while commercializing something and testing it many times, it also gives you a sense of what's called a dominant design. So an aircraft looks a certain way for a reason. Many have been tested, right? So if you look at 1914, 1920, 1930, the aircrafts were very different from each other, and eventually they converged towards something that's the most efficient way to deliver you goods and services. And of course, there's the military side, but that's a different story. So same thing here. We are exploring with our shape. The Cygnus that we are delivering today, it's actually its third version. It's a little bigger, a little more capability based on customer demand. So we incrementally develop what we call heritage-based experimentation and improvement. And space is hard. You've heard that before. the way you make progress in space is usually through heritage and incrementalism. Right? There's some radical innovations there, but they're very risky. Incrementalism and repetition gives you a chance to improve, and at the end of the day, deliver to the market at usually it means a lower price point or an effective price point where you can bring many people into the game. So where do we go from here? What you have not seen, I should have mentioned, NASA is also building the lunar gateway, and the Habitation and Logistics Outpost of that portion, which is a pressurized system that's going to host the astronauts on orbit, is built by Northrop Grumman. Our partners in MAX are building the propulsion element. And there'll be many other elements being built. Now, that is a classical nation-state effort, right? This is on the outer edge of our civilization, so it's important for NASA and other nation-state civil agents to continue discovery there. But based on that knowledge, we are actually building a commercial destination fleet flyer under the Commercial LEO Destination Program space station. And a little bit about that. So this is a NASA concept to take this commercialization effort to the next step after commercial cargo and commercial crew into a commercial space station. Why? Well, primarily because the ISS is getting old, and they probably have to retire. I think the target is about 2030. And now they're faced with the idea, do we want to replace that, or do we want to offer several probably commercial entities the option to build commercial space stations where NASA, ESA, others will be essentially customers. And in NASA's case, they'll shift their budgets into deep space exploration, which is their primary mission, keep pushing the edge of our exploration and science. And if the market is there, and LEO would be the most likely place where you can develop this, then that would be a tremendous achievement, not just for the civil states, but now, to my initial question, for all of humanity. So much like you guys and gals have flown, probably some of you have traveled here via air, no problem, very easily, right? Hopefully comfortably. Same thing with space. There could be an opportunity for a tourism market. There could be an opportunity for an in-space manufacturing market beyond science. So there are all sorts of opportunities there that could be offered should these commercial entities be available. How many of them can be? Well, pessimistic can say maybe one or two that were just subsidizing the work of the ISS, but that's a pessimistic view. If you think of some of the interesting development in pharmaceutical, for example, or fiber optics, and certainly the interest in tourism, those combined could actually open the market for several stations, which could be similar or even differentiated, much like there is a cargo-type aircraft that transports FedEx in US, and then there's a Delta airline, right? So in that regards, there could be different capabilities, different types of hotels. So a lot of times, market health comes from differentiation. Will we get to that? I'm not sure, but we're observing it. What you see here is our initial concept for around the 2028, 2029 timeframe space station. It's one of those concepts that will be essentially ready to go. We can say day one, really takes a couple of tests, but let's say within a month of being on orbit, we could launch a Cygnus-based derivative habitat and a HALO habitat derivative, hosting 2 to about 4 astronauts. Again, very science-oriented at this point, but we can bring additional docking elements with Cygnuses. We have a wonderful partner, Dynetics, which is a leader in that, and they're an airlock. So we and Dynetics are really the initial members of this team. There are other teams there, and again, our initial team is probably going to grow with additional partners, and we make some announcements. But bottom line, we're going to start with these small concepts, and then past that point, we're going to move into what we call a more expanded version as we see demand grow. So in the initial module was maybe let's say 12-meter long entity, then we're going to add something a little bigger, a little more diameter, a few more docking stations, and that's when you can see some elements of what we can call perhaps in-space manufacturing versus science, aka we can introduce some type of a lab. We can introduce some type of experiential concept for tourism. You can see after that we can put some additional structures, perhaps an inflatable. Artificial gravity is always being explored. There's some challenges there. But bottom line, the voyage of discovery is happening. And this voyage of discovery is not just for the technical side. The hardest part we have to do right now is understand the market. The technical side, as Northrop Grumman, we can actually put something up there that's operational based on our heritage. But is it the right element that can help the market in conjunction with our partners, in conjunction with our competitors, right? So there is a healthy way in which we can compete so the consumer gets value. So to that point, we're looking at various markets, meaning what? Well, we do segmentation, targeting, and positioning. What customers are presently on the ISS? How can we offer them better services, more scale, et cetera? Who is not participating? They should be. So we're going basically around the world with a variety of channel partners. Companies, they say, I would like to offer space tourism. Companies, they say, I'm considering this in-space manufacturing for perhaps tissue growth, or you've read a lot of those elements. So we're looking at homogeneous groups of relatively large demand of customers, and then understand what does it take for us from a cost point perspective to deliver where they can either make a profit or get the end good. We're looking at market growth. So it's not just 2028, 2029, but what does it look in 2035? What comes first? What comes second? Are there customers we don't want? And all those struggles that you have to do economically in the market, now we're bringing them to bear in this element. And we are delivering right now the program to a PDR level analysis alongside our competitors. And we're also doing a lot of dialogue, as you can imagine, not just with nation states, but also with commercial partners, and definitely with the end consumer. We're reaching out even in industry structures that have not considered space, or perhaps have not considered human presence in space to help them actuate something. And again, it's a beautiful program. It's not something that any of us are really used to, but neither did our predecessors in aeronautics were used to in, let's say, in 1914 or 1920, 1925. It's an incremental element. So my question to you all is, what can space do for you? That's genuinely a very interesting question to be addressed, to be informed. We appreciate your feedback, so you can think of anything from, is tourism something of interest? How much? What's the price point which we can accelerate that? We can look at built-in space on-orbit manufacturing. Think of that as science plus initially. There's some wonderful science experiments on the ISS, but with the help of 3D printing and advanced robotics, can we accelerate that? There's some complementarities also that you don't see here. I mentioned commercial crew, very important. We like to have a few options there. On-demand return. So return is an interesting challenge, right? Because if I tell a customer, sure, you can have your fiber optics in every 6 months, that may not be good, but every month may be the case. What's the challenge of early return? Again, a lot of times markets thrive through complements. Certainly, the launch revolution has helped us all reduce the price to orbit, and it makes us contemplate all this. It still needs to calm down. So we appreciate all the innovation in that arena, still needs to calm down. When you think of in-space habitation, there are a lot of questions that have not been answered, meaning in terms of insurance, in terms of regulation. So there are many things that we want to make sure we're considering and do it right, so we can avoid some of the mistakes of other industries in the past, and we're trying to learn from it. Will we make mistakes? More than likely. Should we keep going and be brave? Absolutely. I think if you think about it, we live on this small island, right? And we're trying to exploit the resources sustainably. We're facing challenges. How can we go in the universe and find substitutes for some of the things we're doing on Earth? And I strongly believe that the answer is through this slow incremental progress, initially in LEO. Then you can see this space station in my dream eventually moving out of that into orbits far beyond the moon. And then if you watch the show The Expanse, you can have an idea of humanity that lives on multi-planets, reaching the asteroid belt, and preserve our Earth as a green oasis while we reap the benefits of the universe. So that was a short and relatively, hopefully, poignant presentation. And I do want to give, if we have time, for just some questions. See if you all have any questions, any suggestions, love to engage in dialogue. So any questions? Please.
From a very ecocentric point of view, how will we ensure that LEO is as sustainable as we can? Because as we know through flights, and we know the amount of carbon exhaust and emissions that flights have caused. Although development is necessary from a very scientific perspective, but from an ecological perspective, how can we be very, very sure and sensitive towards our planet?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an important consideration that perhaps in the past we did not take, right, for other industries. the cost of launch, especially increased launch and return. Even the pollution of LEO is important. Those are difficult challenges, but they're challenges we are all considering. In fact, some of the associated industries will be in developing sustainable transportation systems. And there's also cost-benefit analysis. So one, as an example, an element that could be of interest here is, would an orbital transfer from here to Australia be less or more pollutive than an aircraft traveling there? So there is a possibility that if you, depending on type of fuel and trajectory, maybe it's more sustainable and more safer for the environment to do orbital travel, should you all feel like doing that. And also get you to Australia in about 45 minutes, which is not bad. So did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. Please.
Andre, your stage 1 and 2 concepts, was that the same station expanded or a separate second station with a larger diameter?
It's an addition. So initially we start with the initial stage and then we couple the second. And then there will be few more. And more than likely what you see there is our initial concept. It's very important for us that we address the initial needs of our anchor tenants like NASA. And then from there, depending on what we discover, we'll keep on expanding. But another concept is that they will have free flyers to support industrial base. So there could be elements where they say, I really don't want to be attached to a human platform, but maybe nearby for human interaction. So that's to be determined as we learn the market. Yeah. Any other questions? Please.
If you were a young entrepreneur who wants to start a startup,
If you are a young entrepreneur who wants to start a new space startup, what are, maybe you can name 1, 2, 3 niches where you would explore first, considering your knowledge of the market?
No, great question. So, number one, we love to engage young entrepreneurs. You are the future. So when we look at the market, we have some large industrials that would love to engage with them in business. But the other thing we're doing is we reach out to incubators and venture capital firms and say, hey, we would like to reserve some space on our station, as our competitors, I'm sure, to young entrepreneurs with interesting ideas. In general, sustainment elements such as 3D printing, for example, AI, ML, that's always a good one, right? In terms of how do you work in a factory, especially remotely. Those are some of the entry points that even without much capital, you can start doing some really good work. The way you interact with us all is usually the direct contact with us or through some type of surrogate in the space market. Well, again, I mentioned incubators, for example, where they can bring you in, they evaluate your idea, efficiently rated versus others. They might even guide you into something that they need, and then you can engage that way. The other interesting element, it's perhaps a little more asset intensive than just a single entrepreneur or a few, is in the services support on Earth, meaning what does it take for a vibrant up and down mass type space station economy. So there are a lot of good things that need to happen on Earth, much like in the airline, for example, automotives, that will support that economy. And as these requirements grow, again, young entrepreneurs can jump in first and perhaps even scale relatively fast. Any other questions? Please.
Hi. There are other projects for commercial space stations, including Starlab, Orbital Reef, Axiom Space Station also. What differentiates yours from the others, and what makes you think that yours will succeed and others will fail, or that everyone can succeed? Thanks.
I never heard that question before. Just kidding. No, great question. So number one, I hope we all succeed, honestly. I hope we all succeed. I hope we try different things. I hope there's enough of a market for all of us to succeed. Differentiation for us is heritage, right? So we're right now the only ones that perform commercial services through our Cygnus among the competitors, right? So certainly SpaceX are also doing commercial services. But among the commercial destination free flyer participants, we already have heritage in commercialization. We are building a space station for the moon, which is actually harder in some ways. So we have, to a certain extent, the heritage and the technical knowledge that should something need to be operationalized faster, we can go, right? We're going at the rate that's prescribed for the timeline, but we could operationalize faster. So that's our strength. This heritage is technological. That being said, we're very careful with exclusivity, meaning we want to collaborate. We are in communication. So you'd be proud of that I think all of the, I'm going to call them compatimates, are in communication. We are looking at how do we make the pie bigger before we worry about what we section. Otherwise, we can kill this market. So you have to be very careful and very strategic how we collaborate with each other. And certainly, we come from a position of heritage and technical differentiation. We believe space is hard, and we do want to promote our technologies in supporting our space station, but also others. So our Cygnus product line, for example, it's not exclusive to our station. And should our competitors want to use it for cargo, absolutely, right? Yeah, that's an important element of our strategy. Any other questions? Sir?
As far as market maturity, booster capability is important. How rapidly does Northrop Grumman expect to mature its partnership with Firefly?
A very good question. A little bit outside of my department. So I'll talk to you about that later, maybe, or I find somebody who can give you an answer. But it's interesting enough, we are a large company, and I myself and I included in that particular work, but we're very excited about it. What a pivot. Any other questions? Okay, so, one more, please. Go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. I commend you for actually pushing this forward. This is great. One thing that I was wondering is, how do you reduce the cost of getting up there? If you want to build an industry, I mean, as you know, the flights, tickets are a lot cheaper today than they were in 1912. How do you reduce the cost?
Absolutely. So repeated action as we continuously create demand for the launch providers reduces cost, and there are a couple of economic analyses on how that cost will be reduced and how certain industries will be. We find the market and the demand, that's going to also inform the up mass, down mass requirements, which would hopefully create a decrease in the launch cost. And maybe, I think you had a question. So Richard Mastracchio, our resident astronaut, regrettably was not able to join. He will be at our booth occasionally today. You can meet him there. He's in a different engagement right now. My name is Andre Mitran, so I'm a Director of Strategy and Business Development for Civil and Commercial Northrop Grumman, and I work with Rick closely. Okay, so if no other questions, thank you very much for joining. I'd like to entertain any other questions you might have here. Also at our booth at Northrop Grumman, you're welcome there, and we can discuss the space station. We have a little model, and your feedback, ideas are always welcome. This is for all of humanity, and we hope we can go forward together and prosper. Thank you very much.